It rarely happens the way people imagine. There are no violins swelling in the background, no dramatic confession under pouring rain, no sudden message that says, "I finally understand. You're my twin flame." The exact moment the divine masculine realizes you are his twin flame is almost always quiet. And that's what makes it so powerful. Picture this. It's late at night. The world is asleep. The distractions that kept him busy all day, work, noise, conversations, obligations, have faded. The lights are off. The room is still. And for the first time all day, there is nothing to distract him from himself. He scrolls absent-mindedly. He checks messages. He tries to numb the silence. But something feels different tonight. He pauses. And without warning, your energy hits him. Not as a thought. Not as a memory. As a feeling. A wave that rises from nowhere and settles in his chest. Why now? Why when everything was finally calm? Why when he thought he had moved on? That's the first crack. Because realization does not begin with logic. It begins with disruption. The calm before the storm. For a while, he convinced himself he was fine. After the separation, whether physical, emotional, or energetic, he felt relief. The intensity was gone. The emotional pressure was gone. The overwhelming pull toward you was no longer in his face every day. He told himself it was too much anyway. Too fast. Too deep. Too confusing. Maybe it was just chemistry. Maybe it was attachment. Maybe it was timing. He rationalized everything. And on the surface, his life looked stable again. But twin flame connections don't dissolve just because someone chooses comfort over transformation. They go underground. And underground pressure builds. The trigger he didn't expect. It might be something small. A song you once played in the car. A scent that reminds him of your skin. A random dream where you look at him the way you used to, not with need, not with longing, but with knowing. Or maybe he sees a photo of you. And you look different. Not sad. Not waiting. Radiant. Unbothered. Growing. That's when his chest tightens. Because something inside him recognizes what his mind has been trying to avoid. You are not just someone he met. You are not just someone he dated. You are not just someone he lost. You are the one person who altered him. And he cannot undo it. The memory that feels different. He has thought about you before. Of course he has. But this time the memory feels heavier. He remembers the way you looked at him, as if you could see through the mask he shows the world. As if you weren't impressed by the image, but drawn to the soul behind it. He remembers conversations that went deeper than comfort. Conversations about childhood wounds. Fears he never shared with anyone else. Dreams he barely admitted to himself. Why did he open up like that with you? Why did it feel safe? Why did it feel terrifying at the same time? That's when the question begins forming in his mind, the one he has resisted for months. Why did this connection feel sacred? The ego starts losing its grip. The divine masculine often prides himself on logic. He wants evidence. He wants structure. He wants control. But in this moment, logic doesn't work. If it was just attraction, why does he still feel you this strongly? If it was just ego, why does his heart react when he hears your name? If it was just timing, why does it feel unfinished? He might try to dismiss it. He might stand up, walk around, grab water, turn on a show. But the feeling doesn't leave. It expands, fills the room. It presses against his chest like something alive. And for the first time, instead of running from it, he sits with it. That is the beginning of realization. The soul recognition. There is a specific second. It's subtle, but it's unmistakable. He stops fighting the feeling. And in that stillness, something shifts. He doesn't think, "She's my twin flame." It's not phrased like that. It's simpler. It's deeper. Sounds more like, "She's not like anyone else." And then, "She never was." And finally, "I can't replace her." Not because there aren't other options. Not because he's lonely. But because no one else activated his soul the way you did. No one else reflected him so clearly, both his light and his shadow. No one else made him feel simultaneously powerful and exposed. That's when he realizes, you weren't just loving him. You were awakening him. The weight of understanding. Realization is not romantic at first. It's heavy, because awareness brings responsibility. If you are his twin flame, then he didn't just walk away from a relationship. He walked away from growth. He walked away from healing. He walked away from destiny. That realization stings. It humbles him. It destabilizes the version of himself that insisted he was unaffected. He may not cry. He may not call you. But something inside him kneels. And that internal surrender is the exact moment everything changes. Why it happens in separation. Here's the truth most people don't talk about. He often realizes you are his twin flame only when he feels like he's losing you for real. When your energy detaches. When your attention shifts inward. When you stop chasing, explaining, waiting. Your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. Because when you were there, he could lean on the connection without fully valuing it. When you step back, he feels the energetic cord stretch. And that tension forces clarity. Have you ever noticed how people understand value only when something is no longer guaranteed? The divine masculine is no different. Except this isn't about ego validation. It's about soul recognition. The quiet whisper. The moment is not dramatic. It's quiet. He lies there in the dark. No audience. No performance. No pride. And the truth settles in his chest like gravity. She is part of me. Not possession. Not control. Recognition. That is the exact moment. Not when he texts. Not when he apologizes. Not when he returns. But when he internally accepts what his soul has known all along. A question for you. Have you ever felt that sudden energetic shift? That unexplainable calm after chaos? That intuitive knowing that something has changed? Even if there's no physical evidence yet? Sometimes the moment he realizes is the moment you feel peace. Because recognition happens in the unseen before it manifests in the physical. And the most powerful transformations are the ones no one witnesses. Not even you. Before the realization. Before the late-night silence. Before the quiet surrender. There is almost always a phase that looks completely opposite. The running. If you've experienced a twin flame connection, you already know this stage. It's confusing. It's painful. Feels irrational. One moment he is fully present, open, intense, emotionally connected in a way that feels almost spiritual. The next moment he pulls back. He becomes distant, logical, cold, busy, and you're left asking yourself, what changed? Was it something I said? Was it too much? Was it even real? Here's the truth most divine feminines struggle to accept. He runs not because it isn't real. He runs because it is. The intensity he wasn't prepared for. Twin flame energy doesn't ease its way in. It doesn't knock politely. It enters like lightning. When the divine masculine meets his twin flame, he doesn't just feel attraction. He feels exposure. You see him. Not the curated version. Not the impressive mask. Not the personality built to survive the world. You see the insecurities he hides. The wounds he buried. The potential he's afraid to step into. And that level of visibility is terrifying. Because most people are used to being admired. Very few are used to being mirrored. The masculine ego and the need for stability. The divine masculine energy is wired differently. It seeks control, structure, direction, achievement. It wants to build something tangible in the external world: career, success, reputation, security. When you enter his life, you don't just inspire him. You disrupt him. Suddenly, his emotional world becomes louder than his external one. He starts questioning things he was certain about. He feels emotions he doesn't know how to process. He becomes vulnerable in ways that threaten his sense of strength. And vulnerability to an unawakened masculine feels like weakness. So what does he do? He restores control. The illusion of logic. When he pulls away, it often sounds rational. It's just bad timing. I'm not ready for something serious. I need to focus on work. This is moving too fast. On the surface, those explanations make sense. But if you look deeper, you'll notice something interesting. None of those reasons explain the intensity. None of those reasons explain the depth. None of those reasons explain why, even after he leaves, the connection doesn't disappear. Logic becomes his shield. Because if he reduces the connection to something ordinary, he doesn't have to face the extraordinary nature of it. He doesn't have to face destiny, fear of losing himself. There is another layer beneath the ego, a quieter fear. When he is with you, he feels expanded, more emotional, more honest, more spiritually aware. But expansion requires transformation, and transformation requires letting parts of himself die. Old habits, old coping mechanisms, old definitions of masculinity, the version of him that survived childhood, the version of him that built walls to stay safe, the version of him that never needed anyone. You don't just love him, you challenge the identity he constructed to protect himself. And that feels like death. So he runs, not from you but from the version of himself he knows he must become if he stays. The overwhelm of being seen. Have you ever noticed how deeply he opened up in the beginning? Conversations that lasted hours. Confessions he had never shared. Moments of raw honesty that surprised even him. That wasn't an accident. Twin flame energy dissolves emotional barriers quickly. But here's what happens afterward. He replays those vulnerable moments in his mind and feels exposed. Why did I say that? Why did I let her see that? What if she thinks I'm weak? Instead of embracing the intimacy, his ego interprets it as risk. And risk activates defense. Distance becomes protection. Silence becomes safety. Control becomes comfort. The masculine need to feel ready. Another reason he runs first is because the divine masculine often believes he must be fully prepared before stepping into something sacred. He wants to feel financially stable, emotionally solid, confident, established. If he subconsciously senses that you are the one, the weight of that realization can feel enormous. What if he fails you? What if he disappoints you? What if he cannot meet the depth of what you deserve? Instead of rising to the challenge immediately, he retreats to fix himself in isolation. But here's the paradox. The growth he seeks cannot happen without facing the mirror. And you are that mirror. The push-pull dynamic. This is where the confusion intensifies. He runs, but he doesn't disappear energetically. He checks your social media. He asks mutual friends about you. He thinks about texting you. He dreams about you. Why? Because the soul connection never left. The ego creates physical distance. The soul maintains energetic attachment. And that internal conflict exhausts him. Part of him wants freedom. Part of him wants fusion. Part of him says, "This is too much." Another part whispers, "This is everything." The hidden awareness. Even while running, there is often a quiet awareness inside him. He knows this isn't ordinary. He knows he doesn't react this way with everyone. He knows the emotional pull is deeper than attachment. But acknowledging that truth would require surrender. And surrender feels like losing control. So he delays recognition. He postpones awakening. He convinces himself that space will solve it. Why he has to run first. As painful as it is, the running phase serves a purpose. It reveals the depth of the bond. It exposes unresolved wounds. It forces both counterparts into self-discovery. Without separation, there is no reflection. Without reflection, there is no awakening. The divine masculine runs first because his journey begins externally. He must exhaust distraction. He must test substitutes. He must prove to himself that nothing else replicates what he felt with you. Only then does the illusion of control begin to crack. A question for you. Have you ever noticed that the more you tried to hold on, the more he pulled away? And when you finally released, something shifted. That's not coincidence. Twin flame dynamics respond to energy, not force. The more you chase, the safer his ego feels maintaining distance. The more you detach and evolve, the less control he feels. And when control dissolves, truth surfaces. The hidden gift in his running. His running is not rejection. It is resistance. And resistance always reveals where growth is needed. While he is trying to regain control, you are being called to reclaim your power. While he is hiding from vulnerability, you are learning self-sovereignty. While he is avoiding destiny, you are aligning with it. And ironically, it is your evolution that eventually triggers his realization. Because when he sees you no longer waiting, no longer chasing, no longer shrinking to accommodate his fear. The illusion of control shatters. He realizes he never controlled the connection. He was only delaying the inevitable. In the next part, we will explore what happens when distance becomes unbearable, when silence grows louder than presence, and the divine masculine begins to feel the true weight of separation. But for now, understand this. If he ran, it's because something inside him knew this was different. Ordinary connections don't activate fear like that. Ordinary love doesn't threaten identity. Ordinary relationships don't require ego death. The running is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of awakening. If this reflects your experience, share your thoughts below. Subscribe for deeper insight into the twin flame journey, and stay with me as we unfold the next layer of his transformation. First, the silence feels like relief. After the intensity, after the emotional overwhelm, after the push and pull, distance feels manageable, even peaceful. When the divine masculine pulls away, he tells himself this is what he needed: space, clarity, control. The constant emotional stimulation is gone. The deep conversations stop. The charged eye contact disappears. The energetic tension softens. He can breathe again. Or at least that's what he thinks. Because what he doesn't realize is this: silence in a twin flame connection is never empty. It is amplified. The first stage of separation, artificial calm. In the beginning, his ego celebrates. No more pressure. No more intensity. No more expectations. He distracts himself easily. Work becomes busier. Friends become louder. Social plans multiply. Maybe he even entertains someone new. Something lighter, easier, less confronting. And on the surface, everything looks fine. But twin flame separation is not like an ordinary breakup. With a normal relationship, emotional energy gradually fades. The nervous system settles. Memories soften. Attachment rewires. But here, the cord remains. Invisible. Silent. Unseen. And that's when distance begins to transform. The absence that feels wrong. Days pass. Then weeks. And something subtle starts to shift. It might happen in the middle of a crowded room, or during a quiet commute, or while lying awake when sleep won't come. He notices your absence. Not dramatically. Not desperately, but persistently. You're not there to text. You're not there to challenge him. You're not there to mirror him. And instead of relief, he feels emptiness. Why does everything feel slightly muted? Why does success feel less satisfying? Why do conversations with others feel surface level? This is when silence begins speaking. The contrast effect. One of the most powerful aspects of twin flame separation is contrast. When you were in his life, everything felt heightened. Colors brighter. Emotions deeper. Conversations richer. You activated parts of him he didn't even know existed. Now without you, life feels flatter. Not bad. Just dimmer. He may not consciously connect this to you at first. He might assume he's tired, stressed, distracted. But the truth is energetic. You were amplifying his emotional world. And now that amplification is gone. The memory loop. Silence creates space. And space invites memory. He starts replaying moments. The way you laughed unexpectedly. The way you challenged him without fear. The way you saw through his defenses and didn't leave. Why do these memories feel different now? During the connection, intensity made everything chaotic. Now distance filters the chaos out. He sees the purity of it. He remembers the comfort, the understanding, the unspoken communication. And slowly, he begins to question himself. Why did I walk away from something that felt that real? The energetic pull. Here's where things get even deeper. In many twin flame journeys, the divine feminine eventually detaches. Not out of anger, not out of resentment, but out of self-preservation. She stops chasing. She stops explaining. She stops waiting. She turns inward. She grows. And when she does, the energetic dynamic shifts. Have you ever felt that moment when you finally let go and suddenly he seems to feel it? That's not coincidence. When you release attachment, the energy that was flowing outward toward him retracts. And he feels the absence of it. Because even in silence there was still connection, until you pulled your energy back. And that's when distance becomes loud. The unsettling stillness. There is a particular kind of stillness that unsettles the divine masculine. It's not drama. It's not conflict. It's not emotional chaos. It's your calm. When you stop reacting. When you stop reaching out. When you stop showing emotional urgency. That stillness forces him to confront himself. Before, he could blame timing. He could blame intensity. He could blame circumstances. Now, there is nothing external to react to, only his internal world. And that internal world starts asking uncomfortable questions. Was she really just too much? Or was she exactly what I needed? Was I overwhelmed? Or was I afraid? Silence gives those questions room to grow. The moment it hits, there is often a defining point in separation. It might not be visible to you, but it's powerful for him. Maybe he sees you thriving. Maybe he hears you're no longer waiting. Maybe he senses, without proof, that you're emotionally moving forward. And something inside him tightens. Not jealousy, not possession, fear. Because now the loss feels real. When you were still energetically attached, he subconsciously felt you were there. Now your absence feels final. And that realization echoes. Why silence is louder than words. During the relationship, words carried weight. Arguments, confessions, apologies, passion. But in separation, silence carries even more. Because silence removes distraction. Without communication, he cannot interpret your feelings through conversation. He must feel the connection without reinforcement. And if the bond was illusion, silence would dissolve it. But if the bond was real, silence intensifies it. And that's exactly what happens. The more he tries not to think about you, the more randomly you appear in his thoughts. The more he avoids your name, the more it surfaces unexpectedly. The more he insists he's fine, the more his chest feels heavy at night. Silence becomes undeniable evidence. The ego begins to waver. The illusion of control starts cracking here. He thought distance would weaken the connection. Instead, it magnified it. He thought distraction would erase the feelings. Instead, it highlighted their uniqueness. He thought silence would create clarity. Instead, it created awareness. And awareness is the first step toward realization. A question for you. Have you ever noticed how, during no contact, you sometimes feel sudden waves of emotion, even when you're doing fine? Have you ever sensed him thinking about you without any physical proof? Energy doesn't require conversation. In twin flame dynamics, separation often activates telepathic sensitivity. As silence grows, the energetic channel sharpens. And both counterparts begin to feel what they tried to avoid. The truth about distance. Distance is not punishment. It is revelation. When everything external is stripped away, only truth remains. And in that stripped-down reality, the divine masculine cannot hide behind distraction forever. Silence becomes a mirror. It reflects the depth of what was lost. It reflects the weight of unfinished energy. It reflects the love he tried to categorize as too much. And eventually the question changes from, why was it so intense? To, why does it still feel alive? That question is the doorway to realization. Distance magnifies memory. But realization doesn't fully awaken until something breaks. There is always a trigger. An unexpected moment that slips past his defenses. A moment he didn't prepare for. Didn't predict. Didn't think would affect him. And yet it does. Deeply. The illusion that he was fine. By now, he has convinced himself he's stable. Yes, he still thinks about you. Yes, the silence has weight. Yes, something feels unfinished. But he has learned how to function with it. He wakes up. He goes to work. He talks to people. He smiles. He has compartmentalized the connection. It exists in a quiet corner of his mind, manageable, contained. Or so he believes. Because what he doesn't realize is that suppressed emotion doesn't disappear. It waits. And triggers don't ask permission. The trigger can be small. People often imagine the trigger is dramatic. It usually isn't. It might be seeing a photo of you genuinely happy, hearing that you're dating someone new, passing a place that holds shared memories, A dream so vivid it feels real. Oh, a song playing unexpectedly in a quiet room. Sometimes it's even simpler. He hears your laugh in someone else's voice and realizes it's not the same. And something cracks. The moment the chest tightens. There is a physical component to this stage. Twin flame connections are energetic, but they manifest somatically. His chest tightens. His stomach drops. His breathing shifts. Why does this feel like loss again? He thought he processed it. He thought he moved on. He thought distance meant closure. But the body doesn't lie. The nervous system reacts before the mind can rationalize. And in that reaction, the truth surfaces. This wasn't ordinary attachment. This wasn't replaceable. The shock of seeing you thrive. One of the most powerful triggers is witnessing your growth. Not your sadness. Not your longing. Your strength. He sees you radiant, focused, expanding, not waiting for him, not chasing him, living. And instead of relief, he feels destabilized. Why? Because when you were still emotionally attached, he subconsciously felt safe. He assumed there would always be space for him. But now, you look like someone who could truly move forward. And that possibility feels unbearable. Not because he wants control, but because it forces him to confront something terrifying. What if I actually lost her? The emotional collapse. The collapse doesn't always look dramatic from the outside. He may not cry in public. He may not break down visibly. But internally, something gives way. All the rationalizations, bad timing, too intense, not ready, begin dissolving under the weight of real emotion. He replays the last conversation. The moment he pulled away. The look in your eyes when you felt the shift. And for the first time, instead of defending himself, he feels it from your perspective. That empathy is the fracture point. Because once he feels your pain as his own, the illusion of separation weakens. The guilt layer. After the initial emotional wave, another feeling often follows. Guilt. Not shallow guilt. Deep soul-level awareness. He begins to see how his fear created distance. How his avoidance caused hurt. How his pride kept him silent. And this isn't about blame. It's about responsibility. He recognizes that he didn't just walk away from comfort. He walked away from growth. From someone who saw him clearly. From someone who challenged him toward his highest self. That awareness stings. Because he can no longer pretend he didn't know. The mirror effect intensifies. During this trigger event, the mirror dynamic becomes unavoidable. He sees patterns. How he withdraws when things get deep. How he protects himself instead of expressing vulnerability. How he confuses control with strength. And suddenly, he understands why the connection felt confronting. You weren't too much. You were reflecting him. His wounds. His fears. His potential. And when he ran, he wasn't escaping you. He was escaping himself. That realization is destabilizing. But it's also transformative. Why this feels different from regret. This stage isn't simple regret. Regret sounds like, I miss what we had. This feels more like, I recognize what it was. It's not nostalgia. It's clarity. He understands that the depth, the telepathic connection, the emotional intensity, none of it was random. It had purpose. It had meaning. And it's still alive inside him. That's what overwhelms him. Because if it's still alive, then he hasn't moved on. He has only postponed confrontation. The identity shift. Here's where things deepen further. The trigger event doesn't just make him miss you. Challenges his identity. If you are truly his twin flame, even if he doesn't consciously use that term, then your presence in his life wasn't accidental. It was catalytic. And catalysts change people. He starts noticing subtle shifts in himself. He reacts differently to emotional conversations. He feels more introspective. He questions old habits. He becomes less satisfied with superficial connections. Why does everything feel different after her? Because the connection activated his awakening. And once awakening begins, it cannot be reversed. The fear of reaching out. You might wonder, if he feels this strongly, why doesn't he immediately contact me? Because collapse creates vulnerability. And vulnerability requires courage. He may want to reach out. He may draft messages and delete them. He may scroll through your profile for hours. But pride, fear of rejection, and uncertainty still linger. What if you've truly moved on? What if you don't respond? What if he's too late? So he sits in the emotional intensity instead. Processing, struggling, awakening, the turning point. This trigger event marks a shift. Before he was suppressing, now he's feeling. Before he was rationalizing, now he's questioning. Before he believed he had control, now he realizes he never did. Because love like this isn't manufactured. It's recognized. And recognition often arrives through collapse. A question for you. Have you ever felt a sudden energetic surge? As if he's thinking about you intensely? Have you experienced days where emotions rise unexpectedly, even though you were doing fine? Sometimes when his walls break internally, the energy reverberates outward. Because twin flame connections don't operate solely on physical interaction. They operate through resonance. And when one side cracks open, the other often feels it. Why the collapse is necessary? This emotional breaking point is not punishment. It is purification. It strips away denial. It burns through ego. It exposes truth. Without collapse, realization remains intellectual. With collapse, realization becomes embodied. He doesn't just think you're important. He feels that you are irreplaceable. And once that feeling anchors into his nervous system, the awakening accelerates. After the emotional collapse, something subtle but irreversible begins. It's no longer just about missing you. It's no longer just about regret. It's no longer just about unfinished feelings. It becomes about recognition. Not recognition of romance. Recognition of reflection. Because as the intensity settles and the trigger event echoes through him, the divine masculine begins to see a pattern he can't ignore. You were mirroring him the entire time. The first glimpse of the mirror. At first, this awareness is uncomfortable. He starts replaying conversations, not to relive the chemistry, but to analyze the tension. Why did certain topics trigger him so deeply? Why did your questions sometimes irritate him? Why did your calmness during conflict feel confronting instead of comforting? He remembers moments when you called him out gently. Moments when you said things like, "You're shutting down right now. You're afraid. You don't trust yourself." At the time, he might have felt exposed, defensive, even misunderstood. Now, he realizes you weren't attacking him. You were seeing him. And that realization is both humbling and destabilizing. Why the mirror feels threatening? Most people don't fear love. They fear exposure. The twin flame mirror doesn't just reflect strengths. It reveals wounds. When you entered his life, you didn't just admire him. You activated his abandonment wounds, his fear of vulnerability, his need for control, his avoidance patterns, his hidden insecurities about worthiness. And because you triggered those buried layers, he mistook activation for incompatibility. He thought, "This is too intense. We fight too deeply. She pushes my buttons." But now he sees the deeper truth. You weren't pushing his buttons. You were pressing on unhealed scars. The pattern recognition phase. Once awareness begins, it accelerates. He starts noticing similarities between past relationships and his connection with you. In other relationships, he could stay surface level, detached, safe. With you, there was nowhere to hide. You saw through the performance. You challenged the narratives he built about himself. You didn't allow emotional shortcuts. And he begins to connect the dots. Why did I only feel this level of exposure with her? Why did I feel simultaneously powerful and terrified? Because the twin flame mirror doesn't allow illusion. It reveals truth. The shadow confrontation. This is the stage where the divine masculine faces his shadow. The parts of himself he ignored. The patterns he justified. The fears he projected onto you. He may realize. He withdrew when intimacy deepened. He avoided difficult conversations. He blamed timing instead of admitting fear. He labeled emotional intensity as instability. And slowly the narrative shifts. It wasn't too much. It was too real. The mirror wasn't the problem. Avoidance was. The awakening of responsibility. There is a turning point in this mirror phase. It's when he stops blaming circumstances, stops blaming differences, stops blaming you, and starts asking, what was I avoiding? That question changes everything. Because once he acknowledges his role, he can no longer see the connection as accidental. He understands that the discomfort wasn't a sign to leave. It was an invitation to grow. And growth is rarely comfortable. Why twin flame mirrors are unique. Ordinary relationships allow people to stay partially unconscious. You can love someone without confronting your deepest fears. You can coexist without transformation. But twin flame energy is catalytic. It accelerates healing. It amplifies shadow work. It magnifies unprocessed trauma. You didn't just love him. You illuminated him. And illumination feels blinding before it feels liberating. The ego begins to surrender. As this realization deepens, his ego loses its grip. The narrative of, I walked away because it wasn't right, weakens. In its place emerges, I walked away because I was scared. That level of honesty is not easy for the divine masculine. It requires humility. It requires vulnerability. It requires dismantling the identity of being in control. But the mirror has done its work. He cannot unsee what he now understands. The dual realization. Here's where it becomes profound. He doesn't just see his wounds reflected. He sees his potential. You didn't only trigger his fears. You inspired his highest self. When he was with you, he felt a more motivated, a more emotionally aware, a more spiritually curious, a more connected to purpose. And now, in separation, he recognizes that those qualities weren't random. You activated them. The mirror reflects both shadow and light. And that duality overwhelms him, because he understands something critical. She didn't just show me what's broken. She showed me who I could become. The shift from blame to gratitude. This is a subtle but powerful internal transition. First, the mirror feels confronting. Then it feels clarifying. Eventually, it feels sacred. He begins to feel gratitude for the connection, even if it ended. Gratitude for the emotional depth. Gratitude for the awakening. Gratitude for the challenge. Because without you, he might have continued operating on autopilot. You disrupted that autopilot. You forced introspection. And introspection is the doorway to transformation. The emotional weight of realization. But recognition isn't light. It's heavy. Because once he understands the mirror dynamic, he cannot return to ignorance. He sees how his fear created distance. He sees how his avoidance stalled growth. He sees how pride prevented communication. And awareness creates responsibility. Now the question becomes, what am I going to do with this knowledge? That's where the internal battle intensifies. Why he may still stay silent. Even after recognizing the mirror effect, he may not immediately act. Because understanding yourself is one thing. Rebuilding courage is another. He might still feel not ready, not stable enough, afraid of rejection, unsure if you would receive him. So the transformation continues internally, quietly, gradually. But something fundamental has shifted. He no longer sees you as a past chapter. He sees you as a catalyst. And catalysts are unforgettable. A question for you. Have you ever felt like your connection wasn't just romantic, but transformative? Like you didn't just love him, you awakened him? If so, you've experienced the mirror dynamic. And here's something important to remember. Mirrors don't chase. They reflect. The more you focus on your own healing and evolution, the clearer the reflection becomes. And when he looks inward, he sees you not physically but energetically embedded in his growth. The deeper meaning of the mirror. The mirror phase marks a spiritual threshold. Before this, the connection was emotional. Now it becomes conscious. He understands that you didn't enter his life randomly. You entered as a teacher, as a catalyst, as a counterpart. Whether he uses the term twin flame or not, he feels the significance. And that feeling cannot be undone. There comes a point in the divine masculine's journey where analysis fails him. He has tried distance. He has tried distraction. He has tried rationalization. He has tried denial. He has replayed the memories. He has acknowledged the mirror. He has felt the emotional collapse. And yet the connection remains. Not as fantasy, not as obsession, but as something steady, persistent, alive. This is where ego death begins. Not dramatic, not theatrical, but undeniable. When strategy no longer helps, the divine masculine is often solution-oriented. If something feels uncomfortable, he fixes it. If something feels unstable, he restructures it. If something feels overwhelming, he creates distance. But what happens when none of those strategies work? He tries dating again, it feels empty. He throws himself into work, it feels distracting but not fulfilling. He surrounds himself with noise, silence still returns at night. The connection doesn't dissolve. It lingers like gravity, and gravity doesn't negotiate. The failure of substitution. One of the most confronting realizations in this stage is the failure of replacement. He may genuinely try to move on. He might meet someone kind, attractive, compatible on paper, but something feels missing. Not chemistry, not excitement, depth. With you, conversations felt layered. There were meanings beneath words, silences that felt full, eye contact that said more than sentences. With others, everything feels understandable, predictable, safe, but not transformative. And that's when the thought forms, the one he can no longer avoid. No one else feels like her. Not because others are lacking, but because the resonance was singular. The internal conflict intensifies. Ego death isn't about humiliation. It's about collapse of false identity. He once believed, I can walk away and be unaffected. I can control my emotions. I can decide what matters. Now, he realizes he cannot control resonance. He cannot logically erase a soul-level bond. He cannot force his heart to downgrade something that felt sacred. And that realization destabilizes the identity he built around independence. Because if he cannot control this, then what does control even mean? The masculine identity crisis. The divine masculine often defines strength as stability, being steady, being rational, being emotionally contained. But this connection cracked that container. And now in ego death he sees clearly. Strength was never suppression. Control was never avoidance. Distance was never power. True strength requires emotional courage. And that realization dismantles his old framework. He begins questioning everything. Why do I equate vulnerability with weakness? Why do I fear emotional depth? Why did I run from something that felt aligned? These are not comfortable questions, but they are transformative. The night of stillness. There is often a specific night or series of nights where ego death peaks. He lies awake. No distractions. No noise. Just truth. And truth whispers. You didn't lose her because it wasn't real. You lost her because you were afraid. That sentence hits differently, because it removes every external excuse. Timing, secondary. Circumstances, manageable. Distance, self-created. Fear, that's the core. And when fear is named, ego begins dissolving. The surrender moment. Ego death does not mean instant action. It means internal surrender. He stops trying to convince himself it was casual. He stops minimizing the impact. He stops pretending indifference. Instead, he allows the feeling to exist without defense. And that's powerful, because for the first time he is not reacting. He is witnessing. He observes his longing. He observes his regret. He observes his love, without suppressing it, without dramatizing it, without running. That stillness marks the death of the old self. When logic officially fails. At this stage, logic cannot answer the core question. Why does she still feel connected to me? There is no mathematical explanation. No timeline justification. No external proof required. The connection persists because it operates beyond logic. And he finally understands something critical. Not everything meaningful is measurable. Not everything real is rational. Some things are simply recognized. And that recognition humbles him. The collapse of pride. Pride is often the last layer to fall. Pride says, don't reach out. Don't admit it. Don't look vulnerable. But ego death weakens pride. Because the pain of silence becomes heavier than the fear of vulnerability. He begins imagining scenarios. What if I had stayed? What if I had communicated? What if I had been braver? And instead of defensiveness, he feels softness. Softness toward you. Softness toward himself. That softness is unfamiliar. But it is growth. The realization of irreplaceability. This is the heart of ego death. He understands, not romantically, not dramatically, but clearly, you are not interchangeable. It's not about scarcity. It's about resonance. You activated parts of him that others cannot. You challenged him in ways that forced evolution. You loved him in a way that saw both shadow and light. And he recognizes that such connections are rare. Once in a lifetime rare. That realization strips away ego comparison. It removes the illusion of endless options. It replaces arrogance with gratitude. The internal apology. Often, before any external communication happens, there is an internal apology. He replays moments where he shut down. Moments where he withdrew instead of speaking. Moments where he chose safety over truth. And silently he thinks, she didn't deserve that. This is not self-hatred. It's accountability. And accountability signals awakening. Why ego death is necessary. Without ego death, realization remains surface level. He might miss you. He might think about you. But he wouldn't transform. Ego death dismantles the version of him that resisted growth. It clears space for authenticity. It forces emotional maturity. It humbles the mind so the heart can speak. And once ego dies, the soul becomes louder. A question for you. Have you ever felt a sudden shift? As if his energy softened? As if something rigid dissolved? Sometimes when ego collapses on one side, the energetic dynamic recalibrates. You may feel unexpected peace. Or a sudden intuitive knowing. Because when resistance falls, connection flows differently. The aftermath of ego death. After this stage, he is not the same. He may still be quiet. He may still be processing. But internally the denial is gone. He no longer questions whether the connection mattered. He knows it did. He no longer wonders if it was unique. He knows it was. And that certainty sets the stage for the next phase. Soul recognition. Not as emotional chaos. Not as longing. But as calm, grounded understanding. There is a moment, and it is never loud. It does not arrive with dramatic music, grand confessions, or cinematic rain. There is no sudden knock at your door. No perfectly timed message. No immediate declaration of eternal love. Instead, it happens in silence. And that silence is what makes it undeniable. The exact moment the divine masculine realizes you are his twin flame does not begin outside of him. It begins inside. The shift no one sees. Up until this point he has been thinking, analyzing, rationalizing, explaining the connection away. Maybe he told himself it was chemistry. Maybe he called it infatuation. Maybe he convinced himself it was trauma bonding, bad timing, or simple attraction amplified by intensity. But the moment of soul recognition is not intellectual. It is cellular. Something in his body knows before his mind does. Have you ever experienced that strange, quiet certainty? The kind that doesn't argue? The kind that doesn't need proof? That is what happens to him. He stops trying to figure you out. And instead he feels you. The collapse of denial. There comes a point when denial becomes exhausting. He has tried distractions, other conversations, other connections, work, travel, noise. And yet in the stillness you return. Not as a memory. Not as longing, but as presence. He could be sitting alone doing something ordinary, driving, showering, walking into a grocery store, and suddenly there's a wave. Not pain, not obsession, recognition. A quiet internal voice whispers, "This is different." And here's the key, it doesn't feel dramatic. It feels calm. It feels like coming home to something he didn't realize he'd been searching for his whole life. It's not about missing you. Missing someone feels restless, feels anxious, feels like lack. But this moment feels grounding. He realizes that even in your physical absence, something between you has never left. And that realization changes everything. Because now it's no longer about whether the relationship works on paper. It's no longer about timing or circumstances. It's about truth. He recognizes that your connection exists beyond logistics, beyond ego, beyond control. And that's terrifying because it means it's real. The moment he stops running internally, before this realization, even if he wasn't physically running, he was running emotionally, distracting himself from depth, avoiding vulnerability, minimizing what he felt. But the exact moment of recognition, the running stops. Internally, he exhales, and instead of pushing the connection away, he lets it sit inside him. He doesn't try to shrink it. He doesn't try to redefine it. He doesn't try to downgrade it into something casual or temporary. He simply allows the truth to exist. And in that allowance, the soul speaks louder than the ego ever could. The memory that changes meaning. Often, this realization is triggered by a memory. But not just any memory. It's not necessarily the most romantic moment. It might be something small. The way you looked at him when he was talking about his fears. The silence you shared that didn't feel empty. The way you challenged him not to criticize but to awaken him. He replays it. And this time he sees it differently. Before he may have felt exposed. Now he sees it as alignment. Before he may have felt overwhelmed. Now he sees it as expansion. And suddenly he understands. You weren't trying to control him. You were calling him higher. The realization that it was never random. Here is where the shift becomes irreversible. He understands that the connection was never random. Not coincidence. Not convenience. Not chaos. There were too many synchronicities. Too much intensity. Too much growth triggered in too short a time. And he starts connecting the dots. Why you appeared when you did. Why things unfolded the way they did. Why the separation felt like losing more than a partner, it felt like losing direction. He realizes you were not just part of his life. You were part of his transformation. And transformation is never accidental. The calm certainty. This is the exact moment. Not when he cries. Not when he reaches out. Not when he confesses. But when certainty replaces confusion. It's subtle. He might be alone when it happens. There is no audience. No announcement. Just a quiet inner knowing. She is not just someone I loved. She is my mirror. She is my counterpart. She is my twin flame. And notice something important here. He doesn't feel possession. He doesn't think, she belongs to me. Instead, he feels recognition. Like two frequencies tuning into the same signal. Like two halves remembering they were once whole. The difference between ego love and soul recognition. Ego love says, I want you. Soul recognition says, I know you. Ego love fears losing. Soul recognition trusts connection. In this moment, he stops wanting to have you. He starts understanding you. He sees the purpose of your intensity. The reason you triggered him. The reason he couldn't forget you. It was never about attachment. It was activation. And when that understanding lands, it doesn't create panic. It creates reverence. Why this moment is quiet? You might wonder. If he realizes something so profound, why don't I feel fireworks? Why doesn't he immediately call? Why doesn't he run back instantly? Because this realization is sacred. It is internal. And masculine energy processes inwardly before expressing outwardly. This is not an emotional explosion. It is a structural shift. His internal foundation changes. His perception changes. His understanding of love changes. But external movement takes integration. Recognition is the seed. Action is the harvest. And seeds grow underground first. The invisible bond becomes undeniable. Before this moment, he might have questioned the spiritual aspect of your connection, doubted the telepathy, dismissed the synchronicities, laughed off the intensity. But now, he feels it. He senses when you think of him. He dreams more vividly. He feels your energy even in silence. And instead of resisting it, he accepts it. Not as fantasy, but as bond. He stops asking, is this real? And starts asking, what am I going to do about it? That question only appears after recognition. The power of your absence. Here is the paradox. This realization often happens not because you chase him, but because you stop. Because you detach. Because you focus on yourself. Your energy shifts. And in that shift, the space becomes clear enough for him to feel what was always there. Sometimes the exact moment he realizes is the exact moment he feels you pulling your energy back. He feels the difference. And instead of relief, he feels clarity. He understands what your presence meant. He understands what your absence reveals. And clarity replaces confusion, the sacred pause before movement. After this realization, there is usually still silence. But it is a different kind of silence. Not avoidance. Not ego. Integration. He is recalibrating. Understanding what this means for his life. For his identity. For his future. Twin flame recognition isn't romantic fantasy. It demands growth. Accountability. Evolution. And once he knows you are his twin flame, he knows he cannot approach you the same way again. The old version of him cannot return to you. A new version must rise. A question for you. What if the moment he realizes is not something you witness? What if it's not a message, not a call, not a dramatic return? What if it's happening quietly right now? Would you still trust the process? Would you still choose your growth? Would you still believe in divine timing? Because here's the truth. The moment of soul recognition does not depend on your pressure. It depends on your alignment. And when you align with your own growth, your own peace, your own expansion, you create the space where his soul can finally speak louder than his fear. The exact moment summed up. It is the moment confusion turns into calm certainty. The moment ego quiets. The moment denial collapses. The moment he feels you not as longing but as truth. No drama. No chaos. Just knowing. And once someone truly knows, they can never unknow. The realization may be silent, but it is permanent. And when the divine masculine reaches that point, the journey changes forever. Not because you forced it, but because destiny matured into awareness. And awareness cannot be undone. The moment of recognition is quiet, but what comes after it? That's where the storm begins. When the divine masculine finally admits to himself that you are not just someone special, not just an intense connection, but his twin flame, the emotional aftermath is unavoidable. Because once truth enters the room, it demands accountability. And accountability is not comfortable. The weight of realization, recognition feels calm in the beginning, almost peaceful. But peace quickly gives way to reflection. He starts replaying everything. The arguments, the silences, the words he said in defense, the times he pulled away when you leaned in, the moments he chose pride over vulnerability. And here's the part no one talks about enough. When he realizes you are his twin flame, he also realizes he hurt something sacred. That awareness carries weight. It's not just regret over losing a relationship. It's guilt over mishandling destiny. He understands that what you offered wasn't ordinary love. It was growth. It was expansion. It was unconditional presence. And instead of receiving it fully, he resisted it. Now that resistance echoes in his mind. Guilt is not weakness, it's awakening. For a long time, he may have justified his behavior. I needed space. It was too intense. She expected too much. It wasn't the right time. But after soul recognition, those explanations begin to crumble. Because deep down he knows the truth. It wasn't about timing. It was about fear. And when a man sees clearly that fear made his decisions, that's when awakening begins. Guilt in this context is not self-punishment. It's awareness. It's the realization that he ran not because you were wrong, but because you were right. You saw him. You challenged him. You mirrored his potential. And instead of stepping into that potential, he stepped away. Now the guilt isn't about losing you. It's about losing the version of himself he could have become sooner. The longing that feels different. Before recognition, longing feels like missing someone. After recognition, longing feels like missing home. There is a difference. Missing someone can be replaced. Missing home cannot. He starts to feel your absence in unexpected ways. In quiet evenings. In moments of achievement where he instinctively wants to share the news, and realizes he can't. In conversations with others that feel surface level compared to what he had with you. He may try to distract himself again. But it doesn't land the same way anymore. Because now he understands. No one else activates his soul the way you did. No one else sees through him so effortlessly. No one else challenges him without trying to control him. And that awareness intensifies the longing. But this longing is no longer chaotic. It's deep, grounded, persistent. The inner conflict, pride versus surrender. This is where the real battle begins. His heart says, go back, speak, be honest. His ego says, stay silent, protect yourself. Twin flame recognition does not immediately erase pride. It exposes it. He knows he mishandled things. He knows reaching out would require humility, and humility can feel terrifying. Because what if you've changed? What if you've moved on? What if he no longer has access to the energy he once took for granted? This is the stage where he feels both urgency and paralysis. He wants to bridge the distance, but he also fears rejection. He fears not being ready enough. He fears stepping forward without having fully transformed. So instead of acting impulsively, he begins to process internally. The awakening of responsibility. Here is the shift that separates ordinary regret from spiritual awakening. At some point, he stops blaming circumstances. He stops blaming you. He stops blaming timing. And he starts looking at himself. Where did I shut down? Why did I run from vulnerability? Why did I equate intensity with danger? Why did I resist growth? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are transformative. Because when a man takes responsibility for his emotional patterns, he begins to mature spiritually. And twin flame recognition forces this maturation. It's no longer about getting you back to soothe loneliness. It's about becoming worthy of the connection. That realization changes the entire trajectory. The dreams and energetic pull. During this emotional aftermath, many divine masculines report something subtle but powerful. Dreams become more vivid. Memories feel alive. Synchronicities increase. He may see your name randomly, hear a song that reminds him of you, feel sudden waves of emotion out of nowhere. Before recognition, he might have dismissed these as coincidence. Now he pays attention, because he no longer questions the bond. He feels it, energetically, almost like a cord that was always there, but is now glowing. And instead of fighting it, he observes it. Sometimes even speaks to you in his thoughts. Not out of desperation, but out of connection. The quiet grief. There is another emotion that surfaces after recognition. Grief. Not just grief for the separation, but grief for the time lost. He realizes how much energy he spent resisting something that was meant to elevate him. He grieves the version of himself that wasn't ready. He grieves the moments he could have chosen differently. And this grief softens him. It cracks the armor. Because grief requires vulnerability. And vulnerability is the doorway to growth. Why he may still remain silent. Here is the paradox that confuses many divine feminines. If he feels all of this, why doesn't he immediately return? Because awakening is internal before it becomes external. Recognition doesn't instantly erase wounds. It illuminates them. And once illuminated, they must be healed. He may feel that coming back prematurely, without genuine change, would repeat the same cycle. So instead of rushing toward you, he may turn inward, working quietly, reflecting deeply, rebuilding himself. Not because he doesn't care, but because he finally does. Enough to do it right. The transformation begins in solitude. After the storm of guilt and longing settles, something steady emerges. Determination. He begins to understand that twin flame love is not about possession. It's about evolution. And evolution requires action. He may start addressing old wounds, childhood patterns, fear of abandonment, fear of failure, fear of inadequacy. Because at the core of running is often one hidden belief. I'm not enough. Recognition forces him to confront that belief. And confronting it is painful but powerful. This is where the divine masculine truly begins stepping into his higher self. Not for validation, not for ego, but for alignment. A question for you. Have you ever noticed how silence can feel heavier after truth is known? That's where he is. In a silence filled with awareness. Not confusion, not denial. Awareness. And awareness cannot be reversed. Even if he tries to ignore it, he knows. Even if he delays action, he feels. Even if he appears calm externally, internally something fundamental has shifted. Would you rather he return impulsively, unchanged? Or return consciously, transformed? The aftermath is messy, but it is necessary. The emotional aftermath is sacred. Guilt humbles him. Longing softens him. Awakening strengthens him. These emotions are not punishment. They are preparation. Because twin flame union is not sustained by passion alone. It is sustained by maturity. And maturity is forged in reflection. So if you are in separation right now, understand this. The silence does not mean nothing is happening. Sometimes the most profound changes occur in solitude. Sometimes the deepest awakenings happen unseen. And the emotional aftermath of recognition is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of transformation. He may not say it yet. He may not show it yet. But once a divine masculine realizes you are his twin flame, his soul does not forget. And what the soul recognizes, it eventually aligns with. The storm of guilt and longing is temporary. The awakening is permanent. And from awakening, action will eventually follow. So now we arrive at the question that lingers in the heart of every divine feminine. If he knows, if he feels it, if he has realized you are his twin flame, then why is he still silent? Why hasn't he called? Why hasn't he shown up? Why does it feel like nothing has changed even though everything has changed inside him? This is the stage that tests faith more than any other. Because recognition is internal, but action is external. And there is a gap between the two. Recognition is instant. Integration is not. The moment of soul recognition can happen in a second. But integrating that realization into a man's identity, that takes time. When the divine masculine understands that you are his twin flame, it doesn't just shift how he feels about you. It shifts how he sees himself. And that can be destabilizing. Because now he understands, this isn't just a relationship. This is destiny. This is growth. This is accountability. And growth requires structure. Masculine energy is wired toward stability, provision, direction, action. When he recognizes the sacredness of the connection, he doesn't just want to feel it. He wants to be capable of sustaining it. And if he doesn't yet feel capable, he waits. Not because he doesn't care, but because he cares too much to repeat the same mistakes. The fear of returning unchanged. Imagine realizing you mishandled something divine. Imagine knowing you ran from the very thing that was meant to elevate you. Now imagine going back without having truly evolved. He knows that if he returns as the same version of himself, defensive, emotionally unavailable, avoidant, the cycle will repeat. And repeating the cycle would hurt even more than the initial separation. So he pauses, not out of indifference, but out of caution. He understands that twin flame love magnifies everything. The connection amplifies joy, but it also amplifies dysfunction. And if he hasn't resolved the parts of himself that caused the separation, he risks losing you again. This time maybe permanently. That awareness slows him down. Masculine processing is inward before outward. Divine feminine energy often processes through expression. Talking, feeling, sharing, crying, releasing. Masculine energy processes differently. He retreats. He thinks. He strategizes. He analyzes. He rebuilds privately. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean there isn't movement. He may be restructuring his career, healing financial instability, working through childhood wounds, learning emotional regulation, reevaluating his priorities. But he rarely announces this process. He believes he should return with results, not promises. And that belief can delay action. The pressure of getting it right. Once he knows you are his twin flame, the stakes feel higher. Before recognition, he could treat the connection casually. After recognition, he can't. Now he understands your value. He understands the rarity of what you share. And that realization brings pressure. He may ask himself, what if I fail again? What if I disappoint her again? What if I can't meet her emotionally? What if she expects more than I can give right now? These questions don't come from ego. They come from awareness. And awareness creates responsibility. So instead of rushing forward driven by longing, he hesitates, wanting to ensure that when he moves it's stable. Masculine energy wants to build something solid, not temporary. The timeline of the soul versus the timeline of the ego. Here's where many people misunderstand divine timing. The ego wants immediate relief. The soul wants alignment. The ego says, if it's real, it should happen now. The soul says, if it's real, it will happen when both are ready. Recognition doesn't instantly make him ready. It makes him aware. Readiness requires transformation, and transformation cannot be rushed without cracking the foundation. You might be thinking, but what if I'm ready now? And that may be true. But twin flame union is not about one being ready. It's about energetic balance. If he is still stabilizing internally, premature reunion could throw both of you back into chaos. So the universe often holds space until both energies rise to the same frequency. Not as punishment, but as protection. Pride still has layers. Even after awakening, pride does not disappear overnight. He may feel ashamed of how he handled things. Ashamed of running. Ashamed of hurting you. Ashamed of not recognizing your value sooner. And sometimes shame keeps people silent longer than ego ever did. Because reaching out would mean admitting he was wrong. It would mean being vulnerable first. And vulnerability, for someone who has built walls for years, feels like standing unarmored in a battlefield. So he battles internally. Do I protect myself? Or do I risk everything for truth? That battle can stretch time. But every day he sits with awareness, pride weakens. Awareness softens it. Growth dismantles it. He may be watching from a distance. Silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes he is observing quietly, checking your social media, asking mutual friends about you, wondering if you're happy, noticing if you've changed, not to control, but to understand. He senses your energy shift. He feels when you detach. He feels when you focus on yourself. He feels when you stop chasing. And paradoxically, your detachment often accelerates his movement. Because when he realizes you are no longer energetically waiting in the same way, something inside him activates. Not fear of losing you, but clarity of your value. Your growth becomes the mirror again. The masculine need to provide stability. There's another layer rarely discussed. Many divine masculines delay action because they want to return stronger than they left. Emotionally stronger, financially stronger, mentally stronger. They associate love with responsibility, and responsibility requires capability. If he felt inadequate before, not enough money, not enough emotional intelligence, not enough stability, he may be working to eliminate those insecurities before stepping back into your life. Because now he knows, this isn't casual, this is permanent potential. And permanent potential deserves preparation. The sacred space between knowing and acting. This in-between phase is sacred. Uncomfortable, but sacred. It's where internal shifts solidify. It's where ego dissolves slowly. It's where intention forms. If he acted immediately after recognition, it might be emotional, reactive, fueled by longing alone. But when action follows integration, it becomes intentional, grounded, stable. There is a difference between I miss you and I am ready. The first is emotion. The second is alignment. Twin flame union thrives on alignment. A question for you. If he showed up tomorrow exactly the same as before, would you truly want that? Or do you desire the evolved version of him? The version who understands your worth, who doesn't run from depth, who stands firm in vulnerability, who chooses you consciously, not impulsively. If that is what you desire, then the delay has purpose. Because evolution takes time. And time in divine connections is not linear. It is transformational. The bigger picture. When a divine masculine realizes you are his twin flame, the journey does not end. It deepens. Recognition is awakening. But awakening is only the beginning. Action requires courage. Courage requires growth. Growth requires solitude. And solitude requires time. The silence you experience now may not be rejection. It may be reconstruction. He is not ignoring destiny. He is preparing for it. And preparation often looks like stillness from the outside. But inside, everything is rearranging, trusting the process. This stage is where faith replaces force. You cannot rush his awakening. You cannot control his timeline. You cannot carry his transformation for him. What you can do is continue your own evolution. Because here's the truth. The faster you align with your highest self, the faster the entire dynamic recalibrates. Twin flames operate on resonance. When one rises, the other feels it. When one stabilizes, the other adjusts. So instead of asking, "Why hasn't he acted yet?" try asking, "What is being built behind the silence?" Because once recognition has occurred, it cannot be undone. And once a man truly understands the value of a divine connection, he does not forget it. He prepares for it. And when he finally moves, not from longing, not from ego, not from fear, but from readiness, that movement will be steady. And steady love lasts. After everything, the running, the silence, the recognition, the guilt, the awakening, the integration, we arrive here. At the part no one can control. Divine timing. And this is where your power truly begins. Because the final piece of this journey is not about the moment he realizes. It's about what you do while he does. The truth you may not want to hear. You cannot force soul recognition. You cannot speed up his awakening. You cannot love him into readiness. And you were never meant to. The twin flame journey is not about convincing someone of your value. It's about embodying it so fully that recognition becomes inevitable. If he is truly your twin flame, the moment of realization is not something you create. It is something your growth triggers. Let that sink in. Your alignment is the catalyst. Not your chasing. Not your explaining. Not your waiting. Your evolution. Why detachment is magnetic. When you stop obsessing over whether he knows. When you stop analyzing every sign. When you stop interpreting silence as rejection. Something shifts energetically. You return to yourself. And that return is powerful. Because twin flame dynamics operate on resonance. When you cling, the energy contracts. When you release, the energy expands. Detachment does not mean you stop loving. It means you stop gripping. It means you trust that what is meant for you cannot miss you. And that trust changes your frequency. The divine masculine feels that shift. He may not consciously understand it. But energetically, he senses when you reclaim your power. And often, that is when his realization deepens. The journey was never about chasing. Ask yourself this. If the purpose of this connection was only romance, why did it trigger so much growth? Why did it force you to confront your wounds? Why did it push you into self-discovery? Why did separation hurt in a way that demanded transformation rather than distraction? Because this journey is not just about union. It is about awakening. And awakening does not happen through comfort. It happens through expansion. You were never meant to shrink yourself to keep him. You were meant to rise and let him decide if he will rise too. The real union begins within. There is a hidden truth in twin flame dynamics. The external union mirrors the internal one. When you are fragmented, waiting, doubting, fearing, the connection reflects instability. When you are whole, grounded, confident, aligned, the connection reflects balance. So the most powerful thing you can do right now is not wait. It is to integrate. Heal the abandonment wound. Release the fear of being too much. Stop equating silence with unworthiness. Stop tying your value to his timeline. Because your worth was never dependent on his readiness. And the more you embody that truth, the more magnetic you become. Not just to him. To life. A question that changes everything. What if this time apart is not punishment, but preparation? What if the delay is not rejection, but refinement? What if he is not absent, but evolving? And what if you are being asked to evolve too? Because sometimes we focus so much on when he will return that we forget to ask, who will I be when he does? Will you be the same version of yourself that tolerated breadcrumbs? The same version that overgave? The same version that chased clarity? Or will you be stronger, calmer, rooted in self-worth? The reunion you desire requires the version of you who no longer doubts her value. Trusting what you cannot see. Divine timing is uncomfortable because it requires faith. It asks you to believe in movement you cannot witness, growth you cannot measure, awakenings happening in silence. But think about this. Seeds grow underground. You cannot see them breaking open. You cannot see roots forming. But that does not mean nothing is happening. When the divine masculine realizes you are his twin flame, something is planted. And what is planted must grow at its own pace. If you dig it up every day to check if it's sprouting, you disrupt the process. Trust allows it to develop naturally. The power of focusing forward. Instead of asking, when will he come back? Try asking, what is my next level? Pour into your purpose. Strengthen your body. Expand your mind. Deepen your spirituality. Build your career. Reconnect with your passions. Not to prove anything, but because you deserve a full life regardless of relationship status. Ironically, when you stop making him the center of your universe, you become the center of your own. And that energy is transformative. You glow differently. You speak differently. You move differently. And the divine masculine feels that shift across any distance. If it is meant, it will align. Here's the part that requires courage. If he is truly your twin flame, he will align when he is ready. And if he does not align, then the universe is redirecting you towards something even more aligned. Twin flame journeys are not about obsession. They are about ascension. The connection is meant to elevate you, not trap you in waiting. So trust this. If he has realized who you are to him, that knowing will guide him. If he has not yet realized, your growth will trigger it. And if for some reason this path diverges permanently, you will still emerge stronger, wiser, more aligned than ever before. There is no loss in growth. The exact moment he realizes you are his twin flame may happen in silence. It may happen when you least expect it. It may happen when you have already chosen yourself fully. But your power does not lie in waiting for that moment. Your power lies in becoming the version of you who is whole with or without it. Because here's the deeper truth. Twin flame love is not about completion. It is about reflection. And when you reflect wholeness, you attract wholeness. So trust the process. Trust the silence. Trust the growth. Trust that what is meant for you will not require you to beg, chase, or shrink. It will meet you at your level. If this message resonated with you, take a moment right now and reflect. Where in your life are you being asked to choose yourself more fully? Share your experience in the comments. Have you felt the shift in your connection? Are you in the silent stage, the awakening stage, or the alignment stage? Your story might help someone else feel less alone on this journey. And if you're ready to continue exploring the deeper layers of twin flame dynamics, the psychology, the spirituality, the transformation, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. This journey is not about chasing love. It's about becoming it. And when you become it, everything aligned with you will find its way home.